Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be looking into the Tracy Ocasio case. What happened to Tracy Ocasio? First order of business is the copyright disclaimer. All of this is being used for the purpose of news reporting and for reporting true crime. And I always cite my sources, so if I haven't, let me know. Second order of business, all the people discussed herein are simply innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Anybody named as a suspect or a person of interest or anything like that, they're not guilty of any kind of crime unless they're deemed guilty by a court of law, and we respect that. And the third order of business is I just want to disclose any personal history I have with this case. I searched for Tracy first with Texas EquiSearch, and then I was certified with Search and Rescue Central Florida dog team under Kathy Johnson and Robert Kundiger at that time, and that's also through FEMA. I think it was around the 2009-2010 era. I would have to check my notes, but in regards to that, I wasn't present on the later searches because I went back to work full time. But yeah, so I don't have any insider information, but I just wanted to disclose that. So what happened to Tracy Ocasio? Tracy Eileen Ocasio, age 27, went missing on May 26, 2009. That was almost 13 years ago. That is crazy to think it's been so long. Tracy is 5'5", approximately 120 pounds. She has light brown hair and brown eyes. Her family, her parents are Joseph and Elizabeth Liz Ocasio, and I believe Tracy has a brother named Joey as well, and they lived in Ocoee. For those of you who don't know Florida, Ocoee is a city very close to Orlando. You can, I guess, maybe you could even call it a suburb of Orlando. So this is Tracy Eileen Ocasio. Let's talk a little bit about her. She was daddy's little girl. She had eclectic tastes. She liked reptiles like lizards and scorpions, and she liked cats and history books. Tracy was a trusting soul, and she made friends easily. And her mother recalled that when they would go to the beach as a child, sometimes she'd point out another family and tell her mom that the other children were her friends. And she would just see a kid that was her own age and just knew that kid would be her friend. Tracy's favorite basketball team was the local Orlando Magic. And Tracy was living with her parents, working as a waitress sometimes and at places like Denny's or Michael's and Ross. Those are big box stores for discount clothing and goods. And she was taking online college courses and hoping one day to study radiology. So you have this sweet girl who's enjoying the Orlando Magic, and she goes to the Tap Room restaurant and bar in Metro West Orlando and was seen enjoying the Magic game. And she happened to be seen on the video surveillance camera leaving with a man named James Virgil Hattaway, or Jimmy Hattaway, age 28. This is a picture of the Florida Tap Room bar and restaurant. It's off Raleigh Street, and I'll pop a map up here. So here's a Google map of the location of the taproom bar off Raleigh Street. And if you look at the little box I wrote, police substation to the left of the box, you can see that the Southwest Community Police Office station is right there. Not that it would have been necessary at this point, I'm just noting. Allegedly, Tracy had met Jimmy Hattaway at the taproom bar 2 weeks prior. So Tracy had been watching the Orlando Magic game at this bar, and she and Jimmy Hattaway allegedly left at last call. That's approximately 1:30 a.m., and she was seen on the surveillance footage wearing a black tank top, jeans, a black hooded jacket. To me, the jacket didn't seem as dark as the tank top, and a green and white hat. Tracy's mother, Liz, said she goes there every Magic game and she cheers for the Magic, and afterwards she texts everybody she knows and says, "Go Magic." And apparently that didn't happen after this game. And mind you, the Magic had won against the Cleveland Cavaliers, so she more than likely would have been happy about it and texted out her happy "Go Magic." And Tracy had also told her mother that she would be home that night, but she did not return. Here's a still of the surveillance footage of Tracy Ocasio leaving the tap room with Jimmy Hattaway. He allegedly asked her for a ride home. So allegedly, they leave this location around 1:30 a.m. and they travel to the Hattaway house. I found this map on the internet. I'm not sure who to credit, but this map shows that pink route is the route from the tap room up to where her car is later found abandoned. Okay, and you're gonna see some cell phone tower activity and things like that, but that's what to focus on in this part of the map. On Wednesday, May 27, 2009, Tracy's car was found in Ocoee at 7 p.m. in a vacant lot off Franklin Street. I'll pop a map up here. Her 2005 yellow Chevrolet Cobalt coupe with the license plate J051EC was found abandoned, unlocked, and literally 150 yards near the home where Hattaway shared with his father. Jimmy Hattaway told police that Tracy gave him a ride home from the bar and then left. The area where the car was found was dark with no street lights, and Tracy was afraid of the dark. And again, the Hattaway house was literally 150 yards from where her car was found. The Hattaway house was also 15 miles from the taproom bar. So looking at the map here on the screen, you can see where the car is circled right here in blue. That's Tracy's car, where it was found abandoned. And that street at that time had no street lights. And you see, if you just take a little hop, skip, and a jump down West Franklin Street and then cross over, you down to the left of the screen, that's where Hattaway was living with his dad. So the Hattaway home is in yellow, and the path from Tracy Ocasio's abandoned vehicle, the easiest path, is in blue. Her dad said there's no way she would have been there by herself with no lights and no street lights. Regarding where the car was left, like she wouldn't have left him at his house and driven off to this area to sit in the dark. No way. Allegedly, the front seats were reclined forward in her car. Her iPod, her keys, her Verizon LG Voyager cell phone, and her wallet were also missing. Her phone went silent on May 27, 2009. So, in other words, Tracy's cell phone last pinged in the vicinity of Hattaway's home. A search warrant was eventually served on the home Hattaway lived with his father off Lyle Street, and the police found drug paraphernalia, in other words, a bong, but no Tracy. And they arrested Hattaway for that bong while out on bond. Sergeant Mike Bryan stated that nothing at the house indicated she had been there. Allegedly, two men, Kyle and Greg, identified Hattaway from the taproom surveillance footage, and Hattaway then gave the story to the police that Tracy gave him a ride home to the 100 block of Lyle Street, and that she wanted to smoke pot with him, but once they arrived at his house, she basically didn't like the drugs he had on offer, so she left. Can we just stop and pause on that bit for a minute? I mean, who gets really picky about pot? I mean, that's something about that doesn't ring true to me, but that's just my opinion. So after getting a search warrant and searching his home, knowing that he's out on bond and finding a bong, they didn't find the drugs. That's strangely enough. Finding the bong and knowing that he had a long rap sheet, allegedly also, well, not allegedly, for juvenile kidnapping. They went ahead and arrested him for those charges. In a way, they're kind of like holding charges. So he was in jail. After finding the car with no Tracy, the investigators used bloodhounds and they used cadaver dogs around the car. The cadaver dogs did not hit around the car. They tried to see if they could get a track scent to see where the dogs would go. They just did not really get anything, which was very odd. Now, when Tracy didn't show up back home, of course her parents became concerned, and her mother tried to call her around 8:30 a.m., and that call ended up pinging off a tower within 1,000 feet from the Hattaway residence at 8:30 a.m. And allegedly, her phone also had pinged at 4:30 a.m. when there was an attempt to call a quote-unquote friend. This information, I believe, has been held back. I'm not sure if she tried to call a friend or someone who abducted her tried to use her phone to try to create some kind of an alibi. But basically, long story short, it seems that her cell phone was pinging away near his home until 8:30 that morning. So this is where the search for Tracy Ocasio begins. This is also where her dad starts sleuthing and mapping routes from the bar to Hattaway's house and posting flyers and showing around Tracy's pictures to the bars and the places she frequented. And Joe also called in Texas EquiSearch's Tim Miller for help. Tim Miller had previously come down to Orlando for the Casey Anthony case, and so Tim Miller came to Orlando, I believe it was around June 12, 2009, and left on June 20th, 2009 for the first visit, I do believe. This is from the Orlando Sentinel. Overnight, Joe Ocasio honed detective skills he never knew he possessed. He worked on mapping all possible routes from the Florida tap room to Hattaway's house. He looked at train schedules, posted flyers at restaurants, and showed his daughter's pictures to employees at the bars she frequented, but no one had seen her. A few weeks later, when police hit the wall in their search efforts, Joe Ocasio called for help from Texas EquiSearch. Founder Tim Miller and his crew arrived in Ocoee the following morning and tried for a week to find her. Volunteers scoured 2,500 acres and found bobcats, alligators, and snakes, but no sign of Ocasio. And at the same time all these searches are going on, the police are investigating the person of interest, later suspect, Jimmy Hattaway. Again, James Hattaway is innocent of any kind of crime against Tracy Ocasio until proven guilty in a court of law, and the state would have to prove that, and they haven't been able to do that. So let's talk about James Hattaway. Growing up, both of his parents were hearing impaired, and he'd been a troubled child with a juvenile criminal record, among other things, kidnapping in Hillsborough County. People spoke of his drug problems, and Hattaway sometimes worked as a personal trainer, allegedly, and he worked with his father cleaning shorelines, dredging ponds, and allegedly he would dump the debris. This is from Eyewitness News. The Sergeant Bryant had said, he's very familiar with going out into open land at night and not getting caught dumping land debris and waste. That's a concern. Oh, yeah. Eyewitness News learned more about James Hattaway. The 28-year-old lived with his father in Ocoee. He also worked with his father dredging ponds. His mother also spoke to the Orlando Sentinel, and she said that he was sent to a boot camp as a child and he obtained his GED. But she also said she hadn't seen him in many years and didn't know anything about the current case against him. And again, one of the reasons he was kept in jail but was because he was on bond and they found the drug paraphernalia, and that the judge was cognizant of the fact that when he was a juvenile there was a conviction for kidnapping and bodily injury, so that's why he was held under concern. After Hattaway was arrested and escorted by the Ocoee Police Department, he said essentially to the press, "I'm innocent. She left. I hung out with my father. We just hung out. She gave me a ride home." Also want to note for the record that Hattaway consented to having his DNA taken. The detective sergeant stated he consented to the swab. That was no problem. Oh, I also want to note as a side note is when they arrested him, he was wearing a Eustis Fire Department t-shirt, and they got extremely butthurt about that because he never worked for the fire department. He's never been a firefighter for the city of Eustis, said their public information officer. These are not shirts we sell to the public. So I don't know if he got it out of a bin at the Salvation Army or what. But yeah, they had to let everybody know that he had no association with the Eustis Fire Department. We'll come back to Hattaway because at this point he's in jail. But let's get back to the searches. Her parents, Joe and Liz Ocasio, in many ways were leading the search for finding their daughter. And they were giving many interviews with local outlets about Tracy and trying to drum up interest and drum up attention. I mean, we need kind of like Gabby Petito like attention on this to get her found. Here's a photo by Red Huber, former Orlando Sentinel photographer. I've always tried to contact this fella and I can never get a hold of him to, see if I can get a hold of other photos, because for so many of the cases here, he was the photographer at the time. Here we show the K9 units from 6 counties were gathered on June 11th to search Ingram and Claricona Ocoee roads. That's in West Orange County. They were looking all over for Tracy. This 280-acre area was allegedly where Hattaway illegally dumped many goods, things like cattails and lily pads that he dredged from ponds, and he would go to this location and dump it. I recall, I think it was with EquiSearch that we searched this area, and oh my lord, this is an illegal dumping ground. They had shingles all over the place and just old beds and like mattresses. And I think in every search I've ever done in wooded areas, by the way, doesn't matter who I searched with, you always find a random toilet. People do not want to go to the dump and pay the dump fees for certain things, and so they end up in these rural areas or where people have land that they're not minding it. And I'm not saying that this owner was negligent. I'm just saying that people have been dumping stuff or had been dumping stuff on this property for yonks, and it was huge and it was stinky and nasty. And every now and then there'd be like a random dead animal, because there's 280 acres, and then people get all excited and you're sitting there thinking, no, that's just, it's just a dead animal. It was a large area and it was hot. We're talking summertime. So the dogs, like when you take dogs out to this area, you can only run them so long because you can't overheat your very expensive trained dog. And meanwhile, while all these physical searches are going on, Tracy's mother's keeping tabs on Hattaway. She's going to his cases. He had a criminal mischief case that he ends up being found not guilty of. We'll get into that. She goes to that case. Also, then people start coming out of the woodwork saying that they were victims of him, and so she goes to those cases as well. So I just want to let you know that there's like a dual thing going on here where people are investigating him and they're also just simply searching the ground. Like, where could she be? They're searching the area around where her car was found and any lake and suspicious area or any area that Hattaway was known to frequent or dump things. In August of 2009, they were searching different areas. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement was joining the Ocoee police also. So they were trying the best they could get all hands on deck to search for Tracy. Then on August 6, 2009, someone called in a tip that they thought they saw Tracy's car in a different area on the wrong side of the road, and that the reason that they noticed it is that I think they had the same type of car or had the same type of car, so they took a note of it. And I believe this was around State Road 50 in Blueford. I could be wrong. But long story short is what happens is then the Orange County deputies on a routine horseback training exercise discover this mid-calf boot near State Road 50 in Blueford. And allegedly when they showed the boot to two of her friends, they broke out crying, or one of them broke out crying thinking it was her boot. And so here's a picture of the boot. They showed them a digital photo of the boot. And then they needed to send the boot off for DNA testing to assess whether it was her boot. So if you look at the map here, the area where the boot was found is within this rectangular blue area. And remember that pink path from the tap room up to where her car was abandoned? It wouldn't be a hard detour just to take a right on, is it Colonial? West Colonial, and go dump a body, you know, in that wooded area, get back on the route for the pink route and go up to where Hattaway's house was. Just saying. And also note for further searches that Lake Bennett is right there. All right, so just keep a note on that. And then the DNA lab results came back, and they were pretty much inconclusive. There was not enough DNA on the boot, and they therefore didn't think the boot was Tracy's. Certainly, Tracy wasn't deceased wearing the boot. Otherwise, then there would definitely be some DNA evidence on it, in my opinion. Liz Ocasio said it actually had an ant colony in it, and it had been there for some period of time. And they also learned that the sole of the boot was not worn. Tracy apparently used the boots that were like that as her comfortable boots, so it would have had some wear to the sole. And it was mostly likely too new and had been there too long to be Tracy's. And Liz said, you know, we try not to get too excited about anything anymore because they're just getting tired of riding that roller coaster. To be clear regarding the testing, I think it, quote, failed to demonstrate the presence of amplifiable DNA. Now, whether they can use a lesser amount in the future, who knows? But in June of 2010, they were still searching Lake Bennett because there was some activity on the north shore of Lake Bennett. A cadaver dog alerted at the scene, maybe even at the shore. I think even maybe more than one did. So they searched Lake Bennett, they searched Meadow Lake, and I believe they also then searched Prairie Lake in due time. So this is from June 7, 2010. Quote, the dog showed a change of behavior near Lake Bennett on Saturday and early Sunday morning, said Liz Ocasio, mother of the missing woman. We've had 5 or 6 dogs show interest in that lake before, so we're pretty sure we can get the Orange County Sheriff to send divers there now. The family has asked the Ocoee Police Department to contact the Sheriff's Office about sending in a dive team. And I found this in the Orlando Sentinel. I had searched with Search and Rescue Central Florida. This is from August 29th, 2009, and they're saying how they're not part of Texas EquiSearch. Yeah, they were totally 2 separate groups. One was, they're both volunteers. Well, Texas EquiSearch would take volunteers from the public, but Search and Rescue Central Florida, you would get training, and then you would go through FEMA to get certified. So to be a search and rescue tech. So anyway, yeah, I actually searched with both groups, and then after a while I just searched with Search and Rescue Central Florida, and then I went back to work and didn't have time, and I wasn't fit enough to keep doing it. Yeah, you have to stay on top of your game physically if you search in the woodlands here in Florida. I mean, you're seeing snakes, and if you're searching the springs, you'll see alligators, you'll see water moccasins, you'll see, banana spiders, rattlesnakes. It's the heat. It's the heat and the heat stroke, the worst. The heat, humidity, and the heat stroke. And, you have to have all the stuff on you. You're carrying all this gear. It's a lot. You have to really be in shape to do a good job. And if you're running a dog team, you can only run the dogs for so long, and you're always training. Like every weekend you're training. So it's a lot it's a lot of time for the volunteer work. And then the police went on record and officially named him a suspect in Tracy's case.
For a year, he was the only person of interest in the disappearance of a local woman. And today, he's now the prime suspect.
Well, today was a chance to get Tracy Ocasio's face back out there, hoping that someone knows something. Her parents and police all believe that James Hattaway had something to do with her disappearance. They just don't have the evidence to prove it. Today, Ocoee police investigators officially named James Hattaway as the prime suspect in the disappearance of Tracy Ocasio.
He was the last person with her. We know he drove home with her. We know we interviewed him. We know he lied about what he was doing with him.
A year ago, the 27-year-old Ocoee woman vanished just after midnight on May 27th after watching an Orlando Magic game at a Metro West bar. She was seen leaving with Hattaway.
Hattaway is the one who doesn't have an alibi. He's the one who gave us a false alibi. He's the one that, yes, he drove her home. He's just where everything's pointing right now.
Her father says it doesn't seem like it's been a year.
We're not going to let it die, and that's why we're here too.
Yeah.
and we have two of her friends here. We've kept in contact with them a lot. They help us get through it too.
Tracy's friends broke down. Until today, Hattaway was only regarded as a person of interest in the case. He sits in the Seminole County Jail on charges in an unrelated attempted murder case. Detectives have not pushed forward yet for prosecution. They say as long as Hattaway is in jail, they can work their case.
We know where he is. He's not going to run. We're not going to lose him. And now we can use this time to try to find more evidence. We can use this time to really find Tracy.
Now, next weekend, June 5th and 6th, Central Florida Search and Rescue will help the Ocasios with a search. It is the largest one the family's had to date, with about 50 searchers, canines, and ground sonar. Live in the newsroom, I'm Gail Pascal Brown, West 2 News.
Did you hear how the officer had said that Hattaway's stories were inconsistent, that he allegedly changed his stories? Apparently, he had tried to pin Tracy's disappearance on a former coworker at one point, and he had changed his stories to the police. And someone else who knew Hattaway claimed that he was a really heavy drinker and that he was very aggressive towards women, and that when he talked to people, he had talked to people about how choking women turned him on. I know it's horrible. After James Hattaway's association with Tracy Ocasio made the news, other alleged victims started coming forward. I mean, who'd have thunk it, right? Sergeant Mike Bryant of the Ocoee Police Department says, "This Jimmy has a preponderance to do violence. He snaps. He gets angry. It's always a woman, ride home, end up alone." A Casper woman told Eyewitness News that Hattaway tried to kill her last August. So that would have been August of 2008, the year before Tracy went missing. And Rachel Clark, the victim, came forward and said that she'd given Hattaway a ride home. Sound familiar? And during a goodnight hug, he just snapped. And that he repeatedly slammed her head against the pavement and tried to snap her neck. And that she had gone to the Castleberry police. That's, I believe, in Fern Park is where this occurred, because I believe at the time that he had lived near Fern Park or whatever. So she gives him a ride home. She goes, they give each other a good night hug, and for some reason he just wigs out on her and tries to snap her neck, and she runs away, and he's slamming her head against the pavement. And luckily there was a witness that came out. And her name was Karen Lowe, and she heard a blood-curdling scream, and she asked the victim, "Are you okay?" And she said, "Rachel said he's trying to kill me," and she was a bloody mess. And the witness said that she was spitting out gravel, and her tongue was bleeding, and it was just a horrifying scene. And I guess for some reason they couldn't locate him. I don't know if to serve him or something, but they never ended up locating him, and they never did anything with that claim. Of course, it takes a while for that case, the Rachel Clark case, to go to trial. And so what do you do in the meantime? You keep searching. You keep trying to find Tracy. And then this weird tip came in and made the news.
Father of missing Ocoee woman Tracy Ocasio says he's received a new tip about the suspect and his daughter's disappearance.
Now, this tipster claims that James Hattaway may be involved in 3 Orlando area homicides before 2007.
Joe Ocasio tells West 2 that he received this new tip via a Facebook page that he set up to get more information about his daughter Tracy, who's been missing since May of '09. This tipster reportedly says the suspect in Ocasio's disappearance, James Hattaway, was involved in 3 Orlando area homicides prior to 2007. The man has provided investigators with the names of 2 Orlando area lakes where the bodies and a gun were reportedly dumped. The tipster says he dated a woman who told him she was Hattaway's accomplice in those crimes. After so many false leads and empty searches, the most recent just this past weekend, Ocasio says he's not getting his hopes up just yet. Whether it's true or not, I have no idea, Ocasio tells West 2. This has happened to us before. Until this guy has been talked to by Ocoee police, I don't want to talk further about him or the tip. Meanwhile, Hattaway is jailed in Seminole County on charges unrelated to Ocasio's disappearance.
I believe the lakes associated with that tip were Lake Susanna and Little Lake Barton. I'm sure they got searched. But I also do know that other searches were performed for Prairie Lake, Lake Meadow, and Lake Bennett. And remember, Lake Bennett was also near where that boot was found. So I think it's June 6th, give or take, 2010. They're searching Lake Meadow, Prairie Lake, and Lake Bennett. And you guys, it's not easy to search a lake here in Florida. You can take the cadaver dogs to the shoreline, and then you can put the dogs on a flat bottom boat, and they can sniff through essentially over the water. Now, then you got to take a dive team in there, and most of these lakes aren't drainable. Sometimes you can, and in this case, they end up draining a lake, and we'll get to that. So let's talk about Onda Christopher George. By June 3rd, 2009, the Apopka police knew that Hattaway had some connection to the missing Onda Christopher George. Let's just call him Chris George, who was last seen with Hattaway and with another acquaintance on February 11th or 12th of 2009. So think this is before Tracy went missing. It's before Hattaway was alleged to have punched a van on Mims Road. That was a minor thing. He wasn't found guilty of that. It was after the alleged or the attack on Rachel Clark, which we're going to get to the trial of that. So you have this fellow who's an acquaintance friend of Jimmy Hattaway. Chris lived in Apopka and was reported missing on February 11th, 2009. Apparently, this is kind of confusing. The stories are confusing. So, allegedly, Hattaway and a guy with the last name of Waters, they were seen coming out of the woods near Lake Carter. And there was a car there. And the police saw this, and they asked him what's up. And they allegedly claimed to police that their friend Chris was on a hallucinogenic drug and ran into the woods. And they were there to help him, okay? And later it was thought that Hattaway may not have been at the scene when Chris actually went missing, that he just went back there to deal with the car. Who knows? All we know is that Chris's car had been abandoned there at Lake Carter, and then they were looking for Chris, and he was nowhere to be found. That's what they knew. And that he was a friend of James Hattaway. So it's February 22nd, 2011 in Apopka at Keener Road and 429. There's Lake Carter. And the lake started drying up. And so the authorities drained the lake. And they found a spinal bone and a skull. And as the lake was drained, additional bones were recovered, like the femur. And the remains were uncovered just yards from where Chris George's truck had been abandoned. And so Rachel George, that's the mother of Chris George, and Tracy's mother, Liz, they end up bonding. They become friends because of their missing children, both tied to Hattaway in some way, him as a suspect at this point in Tracy's disappearance, and in her son's case, being an acquaintance of Jimmy Hattaway. And at this point, as they're digging, they're excavating Lake Carter, neither of these parents know which or both of the bones. Are the bones recovered either of their children? I can't even imagine. You know what I'm saying? That kind of bond that forms, though, because you're on pins and needles to find out if both your children are in the lake. Which one is it, right? On February 24th, 2011, a wallet, ID, and a cell phone was found at the Lake Carter search site. And so it was assumed that the remains were that of Chris George, and it was confirmed via DNA that the body recovered from Lake Carter was that of Onda Chris George. So then they had to look and see whether it was a homicide. This information was uploaded to the Charlie Project. According to the Orlando Sentinel, the cause of death could not be determined due to the condition of the remains. So I speculate that due to the condition of the remains and the story that he was on some kind of drug, that the investigators could not determine whether he got in that lake of his own accord or if there was some kind of a homicide that didn't leave any kind of mark on the bones. So the cause of death was not determined.
James Hattaway, a person of interest in 2 high-profile missing persons cases in Orange County, is on trial right now, though, in Seminole County.
A woman says he tried to kill her back in 2008.
Rachel Clark told the jury she was absolutely in fear for her life. She says James Hattaway turned her favor of giving him a lift home from a party into a near-death experience. Rachel Clark says she thought her life was going to end August 2008.
I thought he was going to kill me.
The state has accused James Hattaway of trying to kill Rachel Clark after she did him the favor of giving him a ride home after a party.
I grabbed him right here and trying to push my neck off to the side.
She demonstrated how when she tried to pull away from Hattaway's goodnight hug, he gripped even tighter, she says. That he gave her neck a violent twist. These pictures show Clark during her trip to the hospital. She says Hattaway tried to choke her in her car, then tackled her when she tried to run away.
I fell face first, and somebody grabbed the back of my head and started slamming my head on the sidewalk, and I was putting my hands in front of my face. 2 fingers in my mouth on the side of my jaw while I was laying face first onto the ground and tried to start pulling my head off to the side.
And what, if anything, was Mr. Hattaway saying to you at that time?
I was saying, actually, don't make me kill you.
Rachel Clark was a victim. We will not deny that fact.
In opening statements, the defense admitted something happened, but they say it falls well short of attempted murder. Since James Hattaway is a person of interest in the disappearance of both Tracy Ocasio and Chris George, both of those families are also in court today. Reporting in Seminole County, Dave McDaniel, West 2 News.
Hattaway maintained that he was drunk that night and everything was hazy. He claimed he never tried to strangle Rachel Clark, and he doesn't know how she got her injuries. Clark alleged that he tried to break her neck, and Hattaway said of that, "I guess I hurt her. I don't know what happened. I cared about her. I wasn't trying to kill her." But the jury didn't buy it, and they found James Hattaway guilty of attempted murder. Actually, he was found guilty of robbery, false imprisonment, and burglary with battery in the attack on Rachel Clark. Now you might say burglary, well, that's must have had something to do with trying to hold her in the car, so that's false imprisonment, and burglary essentially of a vehicle. I don't know what he took from her. I really don't. I don't know that part of it. But yeah, he was facing life imprisonment, and the families were just overjoyed to get some semblance in their mind of some kind of justice. And in May 2012, Hattaway was sentenced to life in prison for the attempted murder of Rachel Clark. Hattaway said, "Her injuries were my fault, and I do apologize for what happened. I know that I did not try to kill her, but I'm sorry for what did occur." And that's all fine, and that's all good. But meanwhile, where is Tracy Ocasio? Where is she? And so the searches continue. And you know how it goes with appeals and the like and asking for new hearings. James Hattaway was a busy little bee working from state prison without a lawyer, you know. He was winning a legal victory and having his case looked at again. He appealed in the Rachel Clark case, and he was claiming that he didn't ever wish to waive his right to a speedy trial. All the defendants are always offered the right to a speedy trial, and he was saying that his defense attorney at the time had pressured him into waiving it. So in February of 2015, his appeal was granted. So they ordered an evidentiary hearing into the allegations that he didn't receive a fair trial. He was trying to say, like I said, that his trial attorneys improperly waived his right to the speedy trial and also failed to put on a lab analyst, that Rachel Clark's blood alcohol level had to be questioned because, she had some drunk driving issues in the past. And I don't think that would have anything to do with whether anybody got their neck snapped, but there you go, right? So he did get his hearing, but it didn't go in his favor. So as it stands now, James Hattaway, who's just a suspect in the disappearance of Tracy Ocasio, serving a life sentence in an attack on another woman. No one knows where Tracy is. No one knows whether she's with us, if she's alive, or if she's deceased. I think her parents may have given up hope that she's with us, but I'm sure that they want to have closure and to put her to rest in a nice place. So Tracy, she's still missing, and you can still call in any information you know. The contact is Detective David Gray at the Ocoee Police Department, number 407-554-7210. The agency case number is 200-901-7537. Now, let's say you don't like to talk to the police. You can always call Crime Line at 1-800-423-TIPS and let them know anything. If you know something about where she could be, if you know something about how she came to go missing, please call those numbers. The family deserves closure. The city deserves closure. And if somebody's out there doing these things to young women, we need them off the streets. If it's not James Hattaway, we need him off the streets. So please, please, if you know anything, I implore you to call. And thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. I really do. And feel free to share this video. Feel free to like it. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up and hit the subscribe bell for more videos like this. And without further ado, have an excellent day. Bye.